I'm Matthew Dank, and you're listening to Service and Beyond, where we interview Defence Force veterans on their careers and their transition out of uniform and into civilian life. Welcome everyone. Today's guest is Jeremy Holder. Jeremy served for 7 years in the Australian Army, including operations with the Special Operations Command, where he was a medic with 2 Commando Regiment deploying to Afghanistan. He's also worked on domestic counter-terrorism as a platoon medic, and he's qualified as an underwater medic clinician. After separating from service, Jeremy started the business TACMED, which has grown significantly and has been the winner of the 2020 Prime Minister's Veterans Awards Entrepreneur of the Year. So this is part 2 of my interview with Jeremy Holder, where he answers the big 8 transition questions, which unveil his journey from Army medic through to award-winning veteran employer with TACMED. Enjoy part 2 with Jeremy Holder. So just we might move on to the last set of questions here. I'm not sure if you've gone over them or not, but there's a few questions for you, some of which you've basically answered, but I think they just give a nice snapshot of your perspective from the transition point. So I can kick off with question number 1. What advice would you give to an ADF member in their first 4 or 5 years on driving their career path?
Yeah, so I think for 5 years in defence, you're very much going into, and start beyond that, certainly these days, you are going into, it is a career more than a job. So, if I was going to stay beyond those 7 years, I would certainly look at, looking at them in those 5-year blocks and working out what's next for me, so whether to go down that technical path in terms of your role, or to look more at that management path. Because, I think not everyone wants to be a manager, as we sort of talked about before. So for me, it'd be really focusing on those short, medium, long-term goals and paths. So what other avenues do you need to go down? What other qualifications and courses do you need to get to be able to move in that path?
What advice would you give to a defence member, let's say they're a deep combat specialist in a particular area, on planning for their eventual transition out of defence and into civilian roles?
I think it's really important for the guys and girls, obviously, who have maybe that very defence-specific role. Say for infantry, there's not really a role that's same as infantry out there in the civilian world. Is that role, that core job that you've done, doesn't define who you are. And it's, even if you do that role for 10 years, for most guys when they get in at, say, 20, at 30 years old, you still have a lot of time to develop a career that's non-related to that combat role or that very defence-specific role. So just don't let that role define who you are, because that's purely in your head. That if you think just because you're a grunt that you can't do anything else.
Yeah, I think there's a fair bit of evidence that have come out to indicate just that point. People who do identify very, very closely with their role and with the military can struggle more so when they're on the outside. On that point, I guess, did you have much connection to sporting groups, community groups to the outside whilst you were in Army?
No, not really. I honestly didn't have the time. About the only thing I did was I did lots of scuba diving, and I sort of got into a bit of deeper technical diving, and sort of had a core group of guys that I would dive with on the weekends if I was around. Mm-hmm. But apart from that, I just didn't have the stability in defence to be able to rock up to a training session and then a game on a Wednesday or Saturday.
Yeah, sure, it's not easy.
No. It's hard enough now.
It is. Jess, we might have answered this one already, but what was your proudest moment or proudest memory in your defence career?
For me, my proudest moment in defence is, I think, easily going to be to deploy with the Special Operations Task Group to Afghanistan. And I think even in current times with the latest Breton report that's out, I think for me that still doesn't taint the amazing work that I've seen. In my instance, 100% of the guys do. The effort, professionalism, and compassion that a lot of those guys showed over there. And for me as a medic, I think that's the tip of the spear is to support those guys on operations, and probably definitely more luck out of my skill that every one of my guys came home.
Jeez, we've got to back you 100% in that regard. I know personally, I've got obviously a lot of exposure to aircrew, and some of my mates have deployed with SAS and 2 Commando, and not only are they extremely skilled and super hard working, committed, but they're putting themselves on the line, and that's something I think the country and even other veterans, and certainly myself, owes a debt of gratitude to put yourself out there and take that risk for the country.
Yeah, very much.
Jez, what was the key strength or career trait coming out from your defence career?
I think that the self-discipline is something that sort of underrated at my time in the military. Obviously in military you do have some imposed discipline, but I think given what you do in the military, there is quite a lot of self-discipline, and I think that strength or trait that you forge within that really pays dividends in the not just your business environment, but just your personal life going forward. That self-discipline that you have, big time.
What was your biggest challenge or the biggest failure you've had and learned from during your career?
For me, I suppose this is the entrepreneur in me that that it's probably always been with me to a degree. Is that I wouldn't say that defence encourages entrepreneurs to a degree in the military. So I can think of a number of occasions where we had an idea to develop a capability that we currently didn't have, that may have been best practice or someone in the world or something new, and to be able to push that through the chains of command and into wider military was, it was almost impossible, and you just get shot down at every point, which definitely happens in business as well. But I suppose it was just a lot harder in the military to find, who are those right people. And sometimes, you've got the wrong person sitting in the seat, and it'd get squashed many times in defence. So I think that was a big challenge, is trying to, get around the wider military sort of establishment to be proactive and get things done that are different.
Yeah, the bureaucracy is always quite a challenge in defence, particularly when you are trying to get that specific solution and the rules just don't allow it.
Definitely.
What did you learn late in your career or after you transitioned out that you wish you had have discovered earlier?
For me, I think I really underestimated the power of the military network. So I don't want to use the term boys club, because certainly with medics, we were 50-50 between the genders there. So I would just say the network that you develop, the friendships and the amount of people that you meet in defence is just really invaluable. It's pretty rare that I think of some form of product or area or expertise that I need in sort of my current role and can't think back to someone who I met in the military that is sometimes one of the best in those areas. So the network that you develop in the military, I just don't underestimate how good that network can be going forward in your life, probably both personally and professionally.
What was the most important thing you think to your successful transition?
For me, it was doing what I loved, and I was able to take. I had a very clear career path, certainly going from as a military medic to an ambulance paramedic. So it was a very easy transition for me. So I was just focused on what was next, what was the next course or qualification that I needed to hit to be able to move into that next career. So for me, it was just having a bit of a plan. But to be honest, I had a pretty easy transition. It was almost just a different change in clientele and uniform colour.
And on that point, mate, is there anything you would have changed or you would have put more effort or thought into if you were to transition again?
Oh, I would have loved to have done my paramedic degree whilst in the military. Obviously, there's some benefits. I'm not sure if they've got it anymore, but at the time they would have paid for me to get a degree, and I could have maybe expedited some things. But in the end, it didn't make a difference for me. But to, I suppose, have a bit more solid planning. Because personally, like if I didn't get into ambulance, I didn't have a backup plan. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I probably would have ended up on the private circuit or something back in Afghanistan or Iraq. But I didn't have a backup plan, so I'm not sure if that was a good or bad thing. But thankfully, I didn't need one.
Look, mate, thanks for your time. I'll let you get on with your day. Obviously, time's valuable, but really appreciate you making time, mate, and very generous of you coming on this. So.
My pleasure, mate. Thanks, and sorry for being such a pest to get a hold of at the end of the year.
Nah, not at all, mate. You're a busy man. Thanks a lot, buddy. So that's Jeremy Holder answering the Big A transition questions, which encapsulate his pathway from Army medic into an ascent startup business into veterans award-winning business ownership. So hope you've enjoyed, hope you've drawn some lessons from that one. If you haven't already, head across to part 1, listen to his story, listen to his combat experience and his experience as a medic rendering first aid on battlefields in representation of the country. So if you enjoyed that episode, we really appreciate your support during the Soldier On March On Challenge. So the March On Challenge is a fundraising initiative from Soldier On which aims to raise money in support of veterans and their families' mental health. Service and Beyond will be supporting this by covering 96 kilometres on foot in the month of March. So head over to the Soldier On webpage, search for Service and Beyond, or follow the link at the bottom of the show notes. So that's it for now, and look out for our new episode coming your way in the near future.